Elara Voss had lived in the great stone castle of House Thornwood for 3 years, and in all that time she had learned one hard lesson: never let anyone see what your heart is truly doing. She worked as the castle's head archivist. Deep beneath the towers, in a quiet room lit by candles, she cared for the oldest records of the northern Pax. These were fragile books written in an ancient moon language that almost no one could read anymore. Elara could. It was the one gift that had saved her life. As an orphan with no family and no pack, she had been taken in only because she could read what others could not. But there was a second secret she kept, and it was far more dangerous than any old book. Elara was in love with the Alpha King. His name was Calen Thornwood, and he ruled the northern lands with a calm strength that made people trust him and fear him at the same time. He was tall, with dark hair, and eyes that seemed to change color when his wolf stirred beneath his skin. To everyone else, he was a king. To Elara, he was the man who sometimes came down to the archives late at night, not to give orders, but simply to sit near her while she worked. He never explained why, she never asked. She only knew that when he was near, the whole cold castle felt warm. She told herself it meant nothing. A king could not love an orphan who dusted old books, and tonight, of all nights, she needed to remember that. Tonight was the choosing ceremony. For 10 long years, the northern Pax and the rival Ashgrove Pax had fought over their shared border. Many had been lost. Everyone was tired of it. There was only one way left to make peace. The Alpha King would take a Luna from the Ashgrove line, joining the two peoples through marriage. Tonight, in front of the whole court, Calen would name the woman who would rule beside him. Elara stood at the back of the great hall, hidden among the servants and record keepers. She wore her plain grey dress and kept her hands folded so no one would see them shaking. The hall glowed with hundreds of candles. Nobles filled every bench, dressed in silver and deep blue. At the front stood Calen, straight and still, wearing the dark robes of his office. Beside him waited Seraphine Ashgrove. She was, Elara had to admit, beautiful. Golden hair, a proud chin, a gown that shimmered like moonlight on water. She was the perfect choice. She would bring peace. She would give the king strong heirs and a strong alliance. Everything about the match made sense. The old moon priest raised his hands, and the hall fell silent. Alpha King Calen Thornwood, the priest said, his voice echoing off the stone. The Pax await your word. Who shall stand as your Luna? Calen opened his mouth to speak. Then, for one strange moment, he stopped. His eyes lifted from Seraphine and swept across the hall, moving over the crowd, as if searching for something he had lost. Elara felt his gaze pass over the servants at the back. She held her breath, and then his eyes found her. The whole world seemed to go quiet. For that single heartbeat, the king did not look like a king. He looked like a man who had suddenly remembered a question he had forgotten to ask. His jaw tightened, something flickered deep in his eyes, a shifting gold light, as if his wolf had pushed forward to look through him. The priest cleared his throat softly. The moment broke. Calen turned back to Seraphine. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but Elara, who knew that voice better than she should, heard the tiny crack in it. I name Seraphine Ashgrove as Luna of the Northern Pax, he said. Let there be peace between our peoples. The hall erupted in cheers. Nobles rose to their feet. Someone rang the great bells in the towers above. Peace had come at last, and the people were glad. Elara did not cheer. She could not. She simply stood very still while her heart quietly broke into pieces so small she was not sure she would ever gather them again. Then, because staying would only hurt more, she slipped out of the great hall while everyone was celebrating, and no one noticed her go. That night, in her small room beneath the towers, Elara made a decision. She could not stay. She could not watch Calen marry another and pretend her heart was whole. She would leave the castle at dawn, before the wedding preparations began, before anyone could stop her or ask questions she could not answer. She would go somewhere far away, some quiet village where no one knew her, and she would build a small, ordinary life. It would be a lonely life. But it would be bearable, which was more than she could say for staying here. She packed a single trunk, her few dresses, a handful of coins she had saved, and one small book of moon poems she had copied by hand over the years. That was all she owned in the world. She wrote a short letter of resignation, left it on her desk, and did not sleep at all. When the first grey light crept through her window, she carried her trunk up the long stairs and out toward the castle gates. The courtyard was empty and cold. Frost silvered the stones. Her breath made small clouds in the air. The great iron gates stood ahead of her, and beyond them lay the road that would carry her away from everything she loved. She told herself not to look back at the towers. She looked back anyway. Then she made herself turn around and keep walking. She had almost reached the gates when she heard it. A low, deep sound rolled across the courtyard. It was not human. It was the growl of a wolf, but larger and stronger than any ordinary wolf. A sound that seemed to come up through the very stones. Elara froze. Her trunk slipped from her hands and thudded to the ground. She turned slowly. Kaelin stood at the top of the wide steps that led into the castle. But he was not himself. His whole body shook. His hands were clenched, and his eyes had turned fully gold, glowing in the dim morning light. He looked as if he were fighting something inside himself, something too strong to hold back. "Elara," he said, and his voice was rough and strange. "Do not move." "Your Majesty," she whispered, "I am only leaving. I did not mean to disturb you. Please, let me go." "I cannot," he said. And then, before her eyes, he changed. She had seen shifters change before. It was usually slow and controlled, a matter of will. This was not that. This was his wolf breaking free whether the king allowed it or not. In the space of a breath, the man was gone, and a great dark wolf stood in his place, taller at the shoulder than any Elara had ever seen. It leaped down the steps in a single bound and raced across the courtyard toward her. Elara wanted to run. She could not. There was nowhere to go, and something in her heart told her not to. The wolf did not attack. Instead, it planted itself squarely between her and the gates, blocking the only way out. Then it turned to face her, and its glowing eyes were not fierce. They were pleading. It let out a soft, aching whine, the sound of a creature begging for something it could not put into words. Slowly, carefully, the great wolf lowered its head and pressed its nose gently against her hand. And in that moment, Elara felt something she had never felt before. A warmth spread up her arm and into her chest, filling the hollow, broken place where her heart had shattered the night before. It was as if two halves of a single thing had finally found each other. She gasped. The wolf shivered. Then, with great effort, Kaelin shifted back into a man, kneeling on the cold stones before her, breathing hard. "You feel it too," he said, staring up at her in wonder. "Tell me you feel it." "I do not understand," Elara whispered, though her hand still tingled where he had touched it. "What is happening?" "You are my true mate," Kaelin said. "You have always been my true mate. My wolf has known since the day you first walked into this castle. That is why I could never stay away from you. That is why the archives always drew me down into the dark. It was never the books, Elara. It was you." Elara shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "That cannot be. If I were your true mate, you would have known. You would have scented it. Instead you chose Seraphine. You stood before the whole court and chose another." "Because the bond was hidden," Kaelin said desperately. "Something masked it. I felt drawn to you, but I could not name it, could not be sure. A king cannot throw away peace on a feeling he does not understand. So I told myself it was nothing. I silenced my wolf for the good of the realm. But when I saw you at the gates, when I felt you truly leaving forever, he would not stay silent any longer. He broke free to stop you, because losing you would be like losing half of myself." By now, others had come. Servants peered from doorways. Seraphine appeared at the top of the steps, her golden hair loose, watching the whole scene with wide eyes. The old moon priest hurried out, his robes flapping. It was the priest who understood first. He came close to Elara and looked at her carefully, at the faint silver mark that had appeared on her wrist where the wolf had touched her, a mark that glowed like the old moon script she spent her days reading. "By the moon," the priest breathed, "the bloodline mask." "Child, do you know what you are?" Elara shook her head. "You are of an old, lost line," the priest said. "Long ago, to protect their children in times of war, That line hid the mating bond behind an enchantment. It kept them safe by keeping them hidden, unnoticed, unclaimed. The bond does not break the mask. Only true, freely chosen love can lift it. He looked from Elara to the kneeling king. The king's wolf loved you enough to break through anyway, and your own heart answered. That is why the mark now shows. The courtyard was very quiet. Everyone was looking at Elara. She turned to Seraphine, her heart pounding. Here was the woman who was meant to bring peace. Here was the alliance that would end 10 years of loss. How could a lost orphan stand in the way of that? I am sorry, Elara said to her. I never wished to take anything from you. To her surprise, Seraphine came down the steps and took Elara's hands in her own. There was no anger in her face. If anything, there was relief. You have taken nothing, Seraphine said gently. I agreed to this marriage for peace, not for love. My heart already belongs to another, a warrior in my father's guard, though I never dared say so. I feared there was no way to have both peace and happiness. She smiled, and it was a real smile. Perhaps now there is. Kalen rose to his feet. There will still be peace, he said, his voice growing strong and certain again, the voice of a king. But it will not be bought with false marriages and unhappy hearts. Seraphine, return to your father. Tell him the northern pacts offer a true alliance, one of friendship and shared borders, sealed by honest agreement between equals. Tell him his daughter is free to marry where she loves. That is the peace I now offer, and it is a better one than we planned. Seraphine's eyes shone. My father is a proud man, she said, but he is not a foolish one. He wants an end to the fighting as much as anyone. I believe he will accept. And in time, he did, but that came later. For now, in the cold, bright courtyard, Kalen turned back to Elara. The gates still stood open behind her. The road still stretched away, but she no longer felt any wish to walk it. I chose wrongly once, Kalen said quietly, so only she could hear. I let fear and duty speak louder than my own heart. I will not do it again. I am not asking you to stay because my wolf blocked your path. I am asking because I am asking, as a man, with my eyes open and the whole court watching. Stay, Elara, not as an archivist hidden in the dark. Stay as my Luna, at my side, in the light. Elara looked at him for a long moment. She thought of the 3 years she had spent hiding her heart, telling herself she deserved nothing. She thought of the letter on her desk and the lonely village that had seemed like the only safe choice. And she thought of the warmth that had filled her when the wolf pressed his nose against her hand, the feeling of finally, after a whole life of being an orphan, belonging somewhere. For 3 years I told myself this could never happen, she said softly. I taught myself not to hope. And now? Kalen asked. Now, Elara said, and a smile broke across her face like the sun rising over the towers. I think I would like to learn how to hope again. She reached out and took his hand. The silver mark on her wrist glowed brighter, and somewhere deep inside him, his wolf let out a long, contented sigh. The great bells in the towers rang again that morning, but this time Elara did not slip away to weep in the shadows. This time she stood in the center of the courtyard, in the pale gold light, with the Alpha King's hand in hers and the whole future open before her. She never did walk through those gates. She stayed, and the castle that had once felt so cold became, at last, a home. And though she remained the only one who could read the oldest moon script, she no longer read those ancient stories of hidden love and lost lines as sad and distant tales. She read them as her own, for she had lived one, and hers had ended not with a broken heart at the gates, but with a wolf who refused to let his true mate leave, and a king who finally found the courage to say the words his heart had held for far too long.